Okay, so hi everyone. So today is my topic, and I've been thinking about this. And okay, let me try and quickly summarize. So there's something called the diminishing marginal utility, and I'll read the definition. Marginal utility is the change in satisfaction from consuming an extra unit of a good or service. Beyond a certain point, marginal utility may start to diminish. If marginal utility becomes negative, then consuming an extra unit will cause total utility to fail or to fall. And then there's something called the diminishing marginal utility of wealth. And that talks about how things have less value, even though they're more expensive, the value you get from them becomes less. So, and a good example is like, if you don't have a car, you need a car, the value of your first car is, especially say you have a family to take around, is very important because it's going to get you from A to B. If you trade that car for a more expensive model, it might feel good, but actually the marginal utility, the benefit it provides you is less than the original benefit. It's similar to if you're hungry and you're starving, like starving people, for example, or people who are below the poverty line, the food that you give to them is important. Whereas to somebody who's rich and wants to go to an expensive restaurant, it's a different thing. It's not from the same basic need, it's surface level. And so the thing I wanted to talk about was in business, when you're working or trying to build something, I think you get a similar level of utility out of the work you're doing. And when you're trying to build something, some tasks they don't give you much satisfaction. They don't fit, even an emotional benefit doesn't come. So even though they're important to the business need, after a while you're fighting against the fact that I need to do this admin, I need to do this task, I need to do this thing that actually, as important as it is, because I've done this before, I'm doing other things or I've been building things for some time, the original satisfaction I got from getting the business to break even has gone. Now to make an extra 5% doesn't give me the same satisfaction. Or to get the first few staff feels really good, but now to manage the extra few staff doesn't feel as good. And suddenly the things that represented landmarks that were huge for you, that motivated you, suddenly you don't get the same benefit or satisfaction. And even though for that person is no less important. And so how as a leader, do you fight off that sense of fatigue of I'm not getting the same benefits or satisfaction, even if I'm making the same progress, the curve's not moving up fast enough. And even if it is moving fast enough, there's bits I still need to deal with, some foundational stuff I need to deal with, that if I don't, it's going to break the curve, but I just don't get the satisfaction from it. So obviously that's a discipline issue, but maybe help me take it to the bottom first to see the other things that come with that sort of fatigue or having to do mundane tasks or cover a box spots, because in business there's always something that could happen. That means you have to cover something that you thought you never had to do before. Suddenly you're pulled in to do it again and you're just not getting the benefit or satisfaction that is going to sustain you or motivate you.
It sounds like arguably complacency a little bit, of where you think that things are going to work because and you're tired of it, you're bored of it, exactly what you're saying. And actually, is it complacency? Because you know it needs to be done, you just don't have the energy to do it. And it's probably why things become stale sometimes, and why actually there's sometimes a shift of management needed, new people coming in to keep that sort of buzz alive, because it is hard to maintain that. I think that's hard to, unless you're really passionate about the thing that you do, which is probably quite rare. That's what we're basically saying is any company after X amount of years will experience that.
Yeah.
That's probably true.
I think, to be honest, no matter what it is that you do, there will always be parts of it that drag. There will always be parts of it that aren't fun, that are admin-y, that are bleh. And humans tend to be creatures of motivation. So when that same motivation level isn't there, even if it's a fun thing that you do, if you've done it for the 100th time, your mind starts going into autopilot. You start wondering, can I be done with this? Can I just, not have to do this? Whereas you experienced joy from that thing before, you experienced joy from that milestone before. Now it's just, okay, we've hit it again, and it's just, becomes very meh type of thing.
A good example even could be with football recently. You get players who score loads of goals, and the ones who score loads of goals normally love scoring goals, and you can tell they love scoring goals. But for example, a Liverpool goalkeeper scored a winning goal recently, and he cried. And there was an emotion, and there was talk about his family, and it was a big thing, because as much as the striker probably loves scoring goals as much as anybody, the fact that that's his one goal that he's going to get probably ever, that utility, the worth of that goal is immeasurable. Whereas for the person, Lionel Messi, who scored 100 goals, unless it's a big goal, I imagine he has to add something to it to feel the same way. Maybe it has to be a special goal or a cup final goal. Like just a regular goal like that would have been to him, wouldn't have the same worth. And I think a goal is a good metaphor because we live our life according to the goals that we make. And some of the goals that we make, we're still going to be happy. So don't get me wrong. It sounds really bad to be like doing well, starting a business, and suddenly you're conceited. Because it feels ignorant to say, but there's something that it doesn't hit the same as the first time you did it. The first time you're able to pay all your staff or to do the thing that you needed to do. And then you can lead to complacency.
You're desensitized.
Yeah.
So imagine constantly, like I love chocolate, right? Imagine somebody giving me a piece of chocolate every hour. I'd be like, okay, you know what? I think I'm over this. I now need to move on to cake. Can you give me a piece of cake every hour? And that's going to then, I think it's a desensitization. But it's what Charlie also said about motivation, is that we are all trying, not all of us, I suppose, most of us are trying to move on to the next part. Sometimes things have met their capacity and maybe you fit that, maybe you don't fit that anymore.
So some of what you're saying is very positive, and that's good. But have I not also picked on any other negative parts of it to take it to the bottom of the impact it can bring to be more, to really, the feeling of terms of what it does to both of you maybe as well if you encounter it, and also the impact it has on people around you. If the people around you who value that goal and they don't see that you value it in the same way, like we have stuff, Jankee, which we talk about at work, where people are praising it and we almost go, why are they still talking about that? But they're really excited about that thing, and it's almost like we're saying, well, there's a bigger goal now. Well, actually, that used to represent a massive goal for us as well. And so what are we doing? Are we now, negatively impacting the people around us? Because it's hard to fake it, it's hard to feign it.
It is hard to fake that. I think people can see that as well, because we don't have the same enthusiasm for some things anymore, because to us it doesn't matter anymore for whatever reason. But some of those things should have been let go of. So there's a bit of that, but maybe we should have replaced it with some other reward or some other motivation. I suppose it's also like, when the rot starts setting in, you get to fully ripe, and then actually after that, naturally things will decline. And that's when, if we as a team or as a person don't control that, it can set its culture elsewhere in the organization. Keep a rotten tomato next to another one, that one's going to become rotten.
True. So you end up causing that if you're not careful. So it's something you have to watch for. But it is that, again, so it's that repetitive thing, that sense of I've done it before, it doesn't feel the same again. I know it's important, but it doesn't feel as good, and I can't replace that feeling. So is there any other bits, maybe Charlie or Jankee, that you can think of that are negative before we start to think about solutions?
Sometimes you just want to hear and feel and do something a bit different. And that's what I think the main killer is. If you kind of get into that, it's just samey, sometimes you do just need a new challenge, or you do just need, a new task or a change of scenery, a change of environment. You do need some change from the monotony. And I think most everyone experiences that. And if you don't guard against that, you can just get caught in that sense of mediocrity or monotony. And I do think that's something that everyone fights against, whether consciously or subconsciously.
And just to because obviously I've tied it up to a theory. So there's different types of that diminishing marginal utility. There's the type that says, I've bought one Hoover or one iron. The value of a second iron to me means nothing because I already have an iron. It already serves that purpose. But something that can do an iron and something else, I might buy. And so there's some things in work where it's like, well, I've already done that. We already have one of those, so we don't need it again. And that's a different thing. And then there's the sense of the repetitive nature of it, that actually the joy I got from it, I've already derived that first one, and that's the emotional one, which is probably even harder to deal with, because one of them is more logical and it's about sharing with your team. We already have that in place. We don't need to do it again. We don't need to, we have an iron. But the emotional aspect of I already derived that joy from this part or from that value, that's really hard to figure out how to replace. So if you want to give me some advice, how do I overcome those slumps in different areas, psychologically, mentally, and behaviorally?
I think, just exploring this a bit, interestingly enough, with the football analogy, it makes me think of managers and how they have cycles, because maybe like a football team has has performed well, they've won the league or whatever else, but after a while they just stop listening to the manager because the message is tired, or they're just for one reason or another they're sick of it. And it was a winning strategy before, but for one reason or another they're sick of it, becomes monotonous, and then they just stop playing, or they want to hear a different message, or they want to do things a different way. And I think as much as that is an example of what you're saying, that can also be a potential solution, and just in terms of changing things up a bit, mixing things up a bit, and how that can almost give things a new lease of life, a new bit of freshness to try and get some motivation, some zeal.
Just creating the challenges, even if they're not there. Like, you have to do it. It's almost like human nature needs not a bad challenge, not obstacles that are impassable, but it's almost like human nature is we shoot better at our goals when there's a challenge in a way. And I think there's something to that. So I think that's a good analogy that you furthered there, is that sometimes you need to create a challenge to get the most out of yourself, to really be ready to take a task on.
You're not creating a challenge, you're not fabricating a challenge out of thin air. You look at what people have done, you look at how they can challenge themselves, you look at new things that they could possibly do, new areas that they could possibly build into. And I'm sure you guys would have members of staff who started in one field, or started in one area, but maybe they've got an interest in another thing, or they believe they can further their skills in a different area, and then they start to pursue that a bit, and then they excel in that area or something else. So,
I think it's a very interesting point you make. We're a bit more pushed for time, so we have to start to move towards the end. But it's similar to what, Jankee, if you'd agree, like in colleges, what they do, we used to create, so as well, Charlie, of course, you just swap people from different departments and just move them around. And it's like, at the time, to me, it didn't make sense. It's like, what's all this merry-go-round? But maybe it's just creating that person a new challenge to have to go in and work and figure something out and look at it with fresh eyes and try and attack something differently. And I don't know, maybe there's purchase in that.
Yeah,
Maybe.
yeah, I agree. But again, also there is a flip side to it, that while it is a motivational issue, some of it, going back to what you were saying before about maybe deriving joy from some of these things, some of that is the deeper, harder question, where you start to say to yourself, okay, do I need to learn to be content, or with some of these goals that are being reached? You can't forever be voracious, or in terms of, I've got to, get the next. I mean, when does that satisfaction?
There's a quote from Socrates, Charlie, based on what you said there, that's really good. It's contentment is natural wealth, luxury is artificial poverty. And if you put that in terms of joy from work, it's like actually being content with your job, that's a mind state to have. But wanting it to feel good and to get joy from it, that's artificial. It's not going to always happen. And I guess that's what discipline is about. And that's why people who are successful have discipline to do it, even when it doesn't feel good, even when it's not about joy, but because the job needs to be done. And maybe that's a simple, short and dry of it.
That makes sense. It's the long game, isn't it? It's if I continue to do this, this could turn into this. And if it is producing the fruit that it's supposed to, then it's about sticking with it and going, I need to roll with the punches here and
right.
suck it up a bit.
It's the small things that you do consistently that create the big joy sometime in the future. So even though you're doing your little goals, Messi scoring them goals because he knows there's a season goal. And maybe after a while, it's because I've got a career goal, I want to score the most goals in history. And so now every goal is about building towards bigger goals, because I understand that I don't get to the bigger goal without the small goals.
And also, I think the analogy, the definition that you've given is quite important. It's we're always striving for the next thing, which is a good characteristic to have, to be ambitious and all of that. But perhaps we don't give enough weight to the people that can sustain that level of whatever you call it, management or income or whatever it is. If you can imagine earning £100,000 for 5 years, great, you know what, excellent. Imagine earning £100,000 for 10 years, for 15 years, for 20 years. We don't talk about that actually ever.
So good points from both of you. To summarize, do you want to give me one wacky way and one sensible way to deal with that sort of sense, the feeling that has been described, and to not let it affect myself or the people around me?
I don't know. Mine's mean. I'm always mean. I'll do a mean one. Is basically suck it up. Get on with it. if it's producing, if it's giving you results that you want in some aspect, then get on with it until you decide that this is no longer for you. But if it was that, you know, if it's not producing anything for you, then move on. But if it's doing some of that or the majority of that, which is probably where I am personally, then it's maybe we just need to get on with it.
Yeah.
Find your pleasure somewhere else.
Yeah, that's a good point. And if I'm really determined to find my pleasure in the work as well, is there anything that you suggest, Charlie?
Maybe something slightly different from what we've discussed so far, because we did kind of touch on some solutions already. Something that just occurred to mind is, obviously we've all got our own personal targets, but another thing could just be helping someone else hit theirs. You know, mentoring, guiding. And the good thing about that is there would always be someone else that you can kind of, you know, help move forward, you know, guide, support, work together with. And that in itself can derive its own joy. So that's another solution too.
Very, very good solution. Just to finalize that with the goalkeeper, I guess that's like Peter Schmeichel watching his son win trophies for Leicester. So on that note, thank you very much.
No idea what that means.
Yeah, don't worry, we'll fill you in after. Thanks, guys. That was good.